Hi, I'm Natalie Rivers. They drained $23,000 from my college savings account for my brother's dream truck, told me education was a luxury we couldn't afford, and suggested I take out loans like everyone else. But what they didn't know was that I'd been quietly documenting every financial decision they made, every promise they broke, and every dollar they spent. When I finally discovered the real extent of their retirement nest egg, I realized they'd chosen favorites long before I was old enough to understand the game. So I played by their rules until I learned to write my own. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up in Phoenix, Arizona, money conversations in our house always happened behind closed doors. The Rivers family wasn't wealthy, but we weren't struggling either. Dad owned a small hardware and garden center on the north side of town, and Mom worked part-time at the church office. They taught us the value of hard work, saving money, and planning for the future. At least, that's what I thought they taught us. The compass necklace around my neck caught the afternoon sunlight as I sat in my dorm room at Northern Arizona University, staring at the email that would change everything. It was from Desert Valley Credit Union, a routine notification about account activity, but the account number looked familiar. Too familiar. I clicked through to the full statement, my fingers trembling slightly as the page loaded. The college savings account my grandparents had started for me when I was born, the one my parents had contributed to every month for 18 years, showed a balance of $47.32. I blinked hard, refreshing the page. Maybe it was an error, maybe I was looking at the wrong account. But there it was again, in stark black and white. The account that should have held over $23,000 was essentially empty. The transaction history showed a series of large withdrawals over the past 3 months, all authorized by my parents as co-signers. My roommate Kelly noticed my pale complexion when she walked in carrying coffee and textbook. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, setting her things down on her desk. "Everything okay?" I turned the laptop screen toward her without saying a word. She squinted at the numbers, then back at me. "Wait, isn't that your college fund? The one you were going to use for graduate school?" The graduate school applications sitting on my desk suddenly felt heavier. I'd been planning to pursue my master's degree in environmental engineering at Arizona State University. The program was competitive, expensive, and represented everything I'd worked toward since high school. My parents had always encouraged my academic ambitions, promising that the money would be there when I needed it. "I need to call home," I said quietly, reaching for my phone. The conversation with my mother was brief and uncomfortable. She stumbled through explanations about unexpected expenses and temporary borrowing, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when she was trying to smooth over something significant. "We'll figure it out, honey," she kept saying. "There are always student loans. Lots of kids take out loans for graduate school. But Tyler hadn't needed loans for his automotive technology program at the community college. Tyler hadn't needed to work 2 part-time jobs while maintaining Tyler had always been the golden child, the one whose dreams came with built-in family funding. That evening, I drove the 2.5 hours from Flagstaff back to Phoenix. I needed to see the situation for myself, to understand what unexpected expenses had consumed 4 years of my graduate school plans. The desert highway stretched endlessly ahead of me, giving me time to think and remember. The compass necklace had been a graduation gift from my grandmother, before she passed away. "True north," she'd whispered as she fastened it around my neck. "Always remember your true north, Natalie. Sometimes family can point you in the wrong direction, but your compass will never lie to you." I'd thought it was just a sweet sentiment from an elderly woman who loved hiking and navigation. Now, driving through the darkness toward Phoenix, I wondered if she'd been trying to tell me something more important. The Rivers Hardware and Garden Center looked smaller than I remembered as I pulled into the gravel parking lot the next morning. Dad was unloading a shipment of fertilizer bags, his movements slower than they used to be, but still methodical and careful. He looked up as I approached, his weathered face breaking into a genuine smile. "Natalie, what brings you home on a Tuesday?" I hugged him, breathing in the familiar scent of sawdust and metal shavings that always clung to his work clothes. Just wanted to visit. It's been a while. We talked about school, about the weather, about the new shopping center being built across town. Normal father-daughter conversation that felt anything but normal. I waited for him to mention the college fund, to explain what had happened, to acknowledge the elephant in the room, but he didn't. It wasn't until I helped him inventory the paint supplies that I noticed something unusual. The storage room in the back of the store had been reorganized recently. New shelving units lined the walls. Commercial-grade equipment that looked expensive. Very expensive. Business must be good, I commented, running my hand along the smooth metal shelving. Dad's expression shifted slightly, becoming more guarded. We've been making some improvements. Your mother thought it was time to modernize the operation. The improvements extended beyond the storage room. New computerized inventory system, updated point-of-sale equipment, fresh paint throughout the customer areas, and a completely renovated break room for employees. I estimated the total cost at somewhere around $15,000, maybe more. Lunch at home was tense in ways that were hard to define. Mom bustled around the kitchen, preparing my favorite sandwich, and chatting about church activities and neighborhood gossip. Tyler wasn't there, which wasn't unusual since he typically worked afternoons at AutoZone, but his presence lingered in the house in obvious ways. The living room showcased a new entertainment system, complete with a massive flat-screen television and surround sound speakers. Tyler helped us pick it out, Mom explained when she noticed me look. He knows all about the technical stuff. In the driveway sat Tyler's pride and joy, a lifted Ford F-150 truck in pristine condition, custom paint job, oversized tires, chrome details that gleamed in the Arizona sun. I'd seen the truck before during previous visits home, but I'd never really considered how much it must have cost, or where the money had come from. Tyler's been working so hard, Mom continued as we sat down to eat. He deserves something nice. He's really matured this past year. The maturation apparently included learning to accept expensive gifts without question. I picked at my sandwich, trying to calculate numbers in my head. The truck, the store improvements, the home entertainment system. The timeline seemed to align perfectly with the depletion of my college fund. That afternoon, I drove through our old neighborhood in Maple Grove, past the elementary school where Tyler and I had both attended, past the park where we'd spent countless summer afternoons. The memories felt different now, filtered through a new understanding of family dynamics I'd been too young to recognize before. Tyler had always been the baby of the family, 4 years younger than me and charming in ways that seemed effortless. While I spent high school focused on academics and planning for college, Tyler coasted through with average grades and big dreams about working with cars. Our parents had always treated our different approaches as equally valid, equally deserving of support. But when college application time came, the message had been clear. I was expected to earn scholarships, to work part-time jobs, to contribute to my own education costs. Tyler's automotive program, on the other hand, came with full family backing and encouragement to focus on his studies rather than work. I'd accepted the different treatment as natural birth order dynamics. Oldest children learn independence, youngest children receive protection and support. It had seemed logical at the time. Now, sitting in my car outside the house where we'd grown up, I wondered how many other financial decisions had been made with Tyler's interests prioritized over mine. How many opportunities had I missed because I'd been trained to expect less family support than my brother. The evening brought Tyler home from work, still wearing his AutoZone uniform, and carrying the easy confidence that had always made him popular with friends and teachers. He hugged me enthusiastically, genuinely happy to see me, and launched into stories about his classes and his job. "You should see the engine I'm rebuilding for my final project," he said, eyes bright with enthusiasm. "It's a 1967 Mustang V8. The instructor says I have a real gift for this stuff." I listened to his excitement, remembering my own feelings when I'd been accepted into the competitive environmental engineering program, the joy of pursuing something you loved, something you were good at, something that felt like destiny. Tyler deserved to feel that way about his chosen path. But he also deserved to understand the real cost of his opportunities. "Your truck is beautiful," I said carefully. "It must have been expensive." Tyler's face lit up even more. $32,000, but Dad got the dealer to throw in some extra. Mom said I needed reliable transportation for work and school. She didn't want me driving that old Honda anymore. $32,000, more than my entire college fund, spent on a vehicle for a 20-year-old who lived 15 minutes away from both work and school. "That's a lot of money," I said, keeping my voice neutral. Tyler shrugged. "Dad says family is worth investing in. Besides, it'll hold its value better than most cars." Mom called it a smart financial decision. I excused myself early that evening, claiming I needed to get back to Flagstaff for morning classes, but instead of driving north, I checked into a budget motel near the interstate and spent the night researching financial records and family account information. The internet trail led me to discoveries I hadn't expected. Property tax records showed that my parents had refinanced the house 6 months ago, taking out a significant amount of equity. Vehicle registration databases confirmed Tyler's truck purchase date and the financing detail. None of the money for Tyler's truck had come from traditional auto loans. It had all come from family assets, my college fund, the house refinancing, possibly other sources I hadn't identified yet. But the most interesting discovery came from public business record. Rivers Hardware and Garden Center had applied for a small business expansion loan 8 months ago. The application had been approved for $60,000, with the funds designated for inventory expansion and facility improvement. $60,000 in business loan money, plus $23,000 from my college fund, plus an unknown amount from the house refinancing. The total scope of family financial activity was much larger than I'd realized. I called Jordan Kim, my friend from high school, who was now studying accounting at Arizona State University. Jordan had always been good with numbers and better with asking the right questions. "Can you help me understand something about family finance?" I asked, explaining the situation in broad terms. Jordan listened carefully, asking clarifying questions about timelines and amounts. "It sounds like your parents have been making some major financial moves recently," she said finally. "The timing suggests they might have been planning something bigger than just helping Tyler buy a truck." "What do you mean?" "Think about it. Business expansion loan, home refinancing, liquidating your college fund. That's not random spending. That's systematic asset mobilization." They were raising capital for something specific. The something specific became clearer the next morning when I stopped by the hardware store before driving back to Flagstaff. A large banner hung across the front of the building announcing "Coming soon, Rivers Garden Center expansion, greenhouse complex and landscaping services." Dad was inside, reviewing architectural plans spread across the checkout counter. The drawings showed an ambitious addition to the existing store, including climate-controlled greenhouse spaces, expanded garden center areas, and a separate building for landscaping equipment and services. "This looks incredible," I said, genuinely impressed by the scope of the project. Dad beamed with pride. "We've been planning this for 2 years. Tyler's going to manage the landscaping services division once he finishes school. He's got a real head for business, and he understands equipment better than I ever did." The pieces clicked into place with uncomfortable clarity. This wasn't just about buying Tyler a truck or updating store equipment. This was about building Tyler a future, creating a family business structure that positioned him as the heir apparent to Dad's life work. "What about the financing?" I asked carefully. "Oh, we've got it all worked out," Dad said, rolling up the plans. "Business loan, some personal investments, creative financial management. Your mother's been amazing at pulling it all together." Creative financial management. My college fund had been creatively managed right into Tyler's future. I drove back to Flagstaff that day with a new understanding of my place in the family financial hierarchy. I wasn't an investment in the future. I was a resource to be redirected toward the real family investment, Tyler's success. The acceptance letter from Arizona State University's graduate program arrived 3 weeks later. Full admission to the Environmental Engineering Master's program, with a start date in the fall semester. The financial aid package included a partial research assistantship, but it would cover less than half of the total program costs. I would need approximately $40,000 over 2 years to complete the degree. Money that should have been waiting in my college fund, earning interest and ready to launch my career. Instead, that money was being transformed into greenhouse construction materials and landscaping equipment for Tyler's benefit. I called my parents to share the good news about my graduate school acceptance. Mom was appropriately excited, asking questions about the program and the timeline, but when I mentioned the financial challenges, her tone shifted. "Well, honey, you knew graduate school would be expensive," she said. "Lots of students take out loans for advanced degrees, it's just part of the process. But what about my college fund?" There was a pause. "We've discussed this, Natalie. That money had to be used for family priorities. Tyler's future, the business expansion. These are investments that will benefit everyone in the long run. Tyler's future, not our futures. Tyler's future. I see," I said quietly. "You're smart and capable," Mom continued. "You'll figure out a way to make it work. You always do." I'd always figured out a way to make things work because I'd never been given an alternative. Work-study programs, part-time jobs, scholarship applications, budgeting every dollar. I'd learned to be financially independent because financial dependence had never been offered to me. Tyler had learned the opposite lesson. Family money was available for his dreams, his convenience, his future security. The difference in our financial education was striking once I started paying attention to it. That night, I sat in my dorm room, with my laptop open to multiple browser tabs, graduate school loan calculators, interest rate comparisons, debt repayment schedules. The numbers painted a sobering picture of the next decade of my life. With loans, I could afford graduate school, but I'd graduate with significant debt that would impact every major life decision for years to come. Where I could afford to live, what jobs I could accept, when I could buy a house or start a family. Tyler would enter adulthood debt-free with a family business waiting for him. I would enter my career already behind, already compromised by financial obligations. The compass necklace felt heavier as I weighed my options. True north, my grandmother's voice echoed in my memory, reminding me that sometimes family could point you in the wrong direction. But what if your compass could point you toward a different kind of truth? What if there were family assets I didn't know about, financial resources that hadn't been mentioned in our conversations about my education costs? I opened a new browser tab and started researching my parents' generation and retirement planning. Middle-aged small business owners, property assets, typical investment strategy. The information I found suggested that people in my parents' situation usually had retirement savings beyond what they might casually mention to their children: 401k accounts, individual retirement accounts, investment portfolios, savings accounts, designated for specific purposes. The average couple in their mid-50s, especially business owners, typically held significantly more assets than just their business equity and home value. My parents had never discussed their retirement planning with me, which was normal, but they'd also never mentioned these assets when discussing family financial priorities and my education costs. If the family had resources I wasn't aware of, resources that were being preserved while my college fund was redirected to Tyler's future, then the situation was even more skewed than I'd realized. I needed more information, but getting that information would require a level of investigation that felt uncomfortable, like crossing a line between normal family curiosity and something more intrusive. I thought about Tyler's truck, about the greenhouse construction project, about the casual way my parents had dismissed my education costs as something I should handle independently. I thought about the years I'd worked part-time jobs while Tyler focused on school, the scholarships I'd pursued while Tyler received automatic family funding. The line between normal family curiosity and necessary self-protection was clearer than I'd expected.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
I started making a list of questions that needed answers. How much money did my parents actually have? How much had they spent on Tyler's future compared to mine? What other family assets existed that I hadn't been told about? And most importantly, if there were resources available for family investments in the future, Why was I the only family member expected to mortgage my own future to pursue my dreams? The compass necklace caught the light from my desk lamp as I closed the laptop and prepared for bed. True north wasn't always the direction your family pointed you toward. Sometimes true north was the direction you had to find for yourself using tools they'd never taught you to use. Tomorrow, I would start learning to navigate by my own compass. Tonight, I would plan the route. The Phoenix Public Library downtown had resources I couldn't access from my dorm room in Flagstaff. Financial databases, business registries, public records that required in-person verification. I drove down on a Saturday morning, telling my roommate I was visiting family, which was technically true even if it wasn't the whole truth. The reference librarian, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair, helped me navigate the microfiche systems and digital archive. Research project? She asked as I signed up for computer time. Something like that, I replied, settling into a cubicle with a stack of request forms and a notebook. The business records for Rivers Hardware and Garden Center painted a more complex picture than I'd expected. Dad had incorporated the business 12 years ago, with Mom listed as co-owner and treasurer. The annual revenue reports showed steady growth, particularly in the last 3 years. They were doing well, better than the modest lifestyle they maintained at home suggest. Property tax records revealed additional details. The store property was owned outright, no mortgage or liens. The family home had been purchased 15 years ago and paid off early, until the recent refinancing I'd discovered. They'd built equity deliberately and strategically, the kind of long-term financial planning that spoke to careful money management and future-oriented thinking. So why had my college fund become a casualty of their planning? I found my answer in the Arizona Corporation Commission business filing. 6 months ago, my parents had filed paperwork to restructure Rivers Hardware and Garden Center as a family corporation. The new corporate structure listed Tyler as vice president and heir apparent, with ownership shares that would transfer to him upon my parents' retirement. I wasn't mentioned anywhere in the corporate documents. The family business that had supported our household for over a decade, that had paid for our house and cars and vacations, was being legally structured to exclude me entirely. Tyler would inherit not just a job, but an ownership stake in a profitable enterprise that would provide him financial security for life. Meanwhile, I was expected to fund my own education and career development independently. I photocopied the relevant documents and drove to a coffee shop to process what I'd learned. The inequality wasn't just about the college fund anymore. It was about a systematic restructuring of family assets to benefit Tyler while leaving me out of the long-term financial picture entirely. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. "Hey sis, wanna grab dinner tomorrow? I want to show you the new sound system I installed in the truck." The new sound system, another upgrade to the vehicle that had cost more than my entire college fund. I stared at the corporate documents spread across the coffee shop table. Tyler genuinely didn't understand the financial dynamics at play. He'd been raised to expect family support and investment in his future. He had no idea that his opportunities were coming at the expense of mine, because no one had ever taught him to think about family resources as finite or distributed unequally. That evening, I called Jordan Kim again. She was working late in the ASU library surrounded by accounting textbooks and calculator tapes. "I need to understand something about retirement accounts," I said, explaining what I'd discovered about my parents' business restructuring. Jordan whistled softly. "If they're restructuring for succession planning, they're definitely thinking long-term about asset preservation. Most small business owners in that situation have substantial retirement savings outside the business. You can't put all your eggs in one basket, especially if you're planning to transfer the business to your kids." "How would I find out about retirement accounts?" "That's private information," Jordan said carefully. "But there are ways to estimate property values, business income, lifestyle indicators. If you know someone's approximate income and expenses, you can make educated guesses about their savings capacity." I spent Sunday afternoon driving through Phoenix neighborhoods, looking at houses similar to my parents' and researching recent sale prices. Online real estate databases gave me comparable values, Mortgage calculators helped me estimate their monthly housing costs, and business revenue reports provided income estimates. The numbers suggested my parents were saving significantly more money than their lifestyle indicated. Conservative estimates put their annual retirement contributions at $15,000 to $20,000, accumulated over 2 decades of business ownership. They had money. Substantial money. Money they'd never mentioned when discussing my education costs or Tyler's financial needs. Monday morning brought an unexpected phone call from Dr. Patricia Valdez, a financial advisor whose office was located near ASU. Jordan had given her my number, explaining that I was researching family financial planning for a school project. "I understand you have questions about retirement savings and family asset distribution," Dr. Valdez said. "Would you like to meet for coffee? I have some time this afternoon." Valdez was younger than I'd expected, probably in her early 40s, with the kind of professional polish that spoke to success in a competitive field. She listened carefully as I explained my situation in general terms, focusing on the educational funding inequalities without mentioning specific family details. "This is more common than you might think," she said, stirring sugar into her latte, "particularly with families that have traditional gender role expectations or birth order biases. Parents often don't realize they're creating long-term financial disadvantages for some children while advantaging others. But shouldn't they be transparent about family resources when making these decisions?" Dr. Valdez nodded. "Ideally, yes. Financial transparency helps young adults make informed decisions about their education and career plan. When parents selectively share or withhold information about family assets, they're essentially making choices for their adult children without their knowledge or consent." She pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back. "If you ever want to discuss your specific situation more thoroughly, I offer consultation services for young adults navigating family financial dynamics. Sometimes an outside perspective helps clarify options you might not have considered." I tucked the card into my wallet, next to my student ID, and the folded copies of the corporate documents I'd discovered. That week I threw myself into research with the intensity I usually reserved for academic projects. Online databases, public records, financial planning resources, legal websites explaining inheritance law and family asset distribution. I was learning a new language, the vocabulary of money and power and family manipulation that no one had ever taught me. The picture that emerged was disturbing in its clarity. My parents had substantial assets they'd never disclosed to me. They'd restructured their business to benefit Tyler exclusively. They'd spent my college fund on investments in Tyler's future, while expecting me to mortgage my own future for my education. But the most unsettling discovery came from social media research. Tyler's Instagram account was public, filled with photos of his truck, his automotive projects, weekend trips with friends, and expensive dinners at Phoenix restaurants. The lifestyle he was documenting required significantly more money than his part-time AutoZone job could provide. In one recent photo he posed next to a motorcycle I'd never seen before. The caption read, "Early birthday present from the best parents ever. 2023 Yamaha R6, because they said I needed a fun ride for the weekends." A 2023 Yamaha R6. I looked up the retail price and felt my stomach drop. $12,000 for a motorcycle he'd use for weekend recreation. I screenshotted the photo and added it to the folder I'd been building on my laptop. Evidence of financial priorities, documentation of asset distribution, proof of the systematic inequality I'd suspected, but hadn't been able to quantify. Tyler's birthday was next month. My 24th birthday had passed 3 weeks ago without any gift or acknowledgement from my parents. I'd received a card in the mail, signed "Love Mom and Dad" with $20 cash inside. The same birthday gift I'd been getting since high school. Tyler was getting a $12,000 motorcycle for his 21st birthday. I'd gotten $20 for my 20th. The disparity was so extreme, it almost felt surreal, like I was misunderstanding something fundamental about the situation, missing some crucial piece of information that would make everything make sense. But the more I researched, the clearer the pattern became. Tyler received family investment and support. I received encouragement to be independent and self-sufficient. Tyler's future was being carefully constructed and funded by family resources. I was expected to construct my own future without family resources. The question I couldn't answer was why. What had I done or failed to do that positioned me as unworthy of family investment? What made Tyler the chosen heir while I became the expendable child? I started thinking about childhood memories differently, looking for clues I might have missed. Family dinners where college plans were discussed, conversations about money and success and future planning. The subtle messages that shaped how Tyler and I learned to view ourselves and our place in the family hierarchy. Tyler had always been the favored child, but I'd attributed that to birth order and personality differences. He was charming and social while I was serious and academic. He was interested in traditionally masculine pursuits like cars and sports, while I gravitated toward environmental science and outdoor activities. Our parents seemed to relate more easily to Tyler's interests and social style, but favoritism was different from systematic financial discrimination. Loving one child more was painful but understandable. Directing family resources exclusively toward one child's future while expecting the other child to provide for themselves independently was something else entirely. I called my grandmother's sister my great-aunt Helen, who lived in Tucson. She'd always been the family truth teller, the one who said things others wouldn't acknowledge directly. "Aunt Helen, can I ask you about something?" "Of course, honey. How's school going?" I explained my situation carefully, focusing on the education funding disparity without accusing my parents of deliberate unfairness. Aunt Helen listened without interrupting, making occasional sounds of understanding or concern. "I'm not surprised," she said finally. "Your parents have always had different expectations for you and Tyler. Even when you were little, they talked about you differently." "What do you mean?" "You were the responsible one, the independent one, the one who would figure things out on your own. Tyler was the one who needed protection and guidance and support. They've been preparing you for self-sufficiency and preparing Tyler for dependence since you were children." The observation hit like a physical blow. I'd been trained for independence not because my parents respected my capabilities, but because they'd decided early that I wouldn't receive the same level of family support as my brother. Did they ever talk about money, about planning for our futures? Aunt Helen was quiet for a moment. "Your father mentioned once that they were setting Tyler up to take over the business. He said you were too smart to be satisfied with running a hardware store, that you'd want to go off and do bigger things." He seemed proud of that, but also resigned to. Too smart to be satisfied with the family business, too independent to need family financial support, too capable to require the same level of investment as Tyler. My strengths had been reframed as reasons to exclude me from family asset plan. That weekend, I drove home to Phoenix for Tyler's birthday celebration. I wasn't looking forward to the event, but missing it would raise questions I wasn't ready to answer yet. The party was held at my parents' house, with Tyler's friends from work and school filling the backyard. The new motorcycle sat in the driveway like a shrine, surrounded by admirers who took turns sitting on it and making engine noises. I watched Tyler show off his gift, beaming with pride and gratitude as he described the bike's features to anyone who would listen. He was genuinely happy, genuinely grateful, genuinely unaware that his happiness was being subsidized by the sacrifice of my educational opportunities. "Pretty amazing, right?" Mom said, appearing beside me with a plate of birthday cake. "We wanted to do something special for his 21st. It's very expensive," I said carefully. Mom waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, we've been saving for it. Tyler deserves nice things. He's been working so hard at school and his job, saving for it, while simultaneously spending my college fund on business improvements and truck purchases." "What about graduate school funding?" I asked. "Have you been saving for that too?" Mom's expression shifted slightly, becoming more guarded. "Natalie, we've talked about this. Graduate school is an investment in your future. It's appropriate for you to finance it yourself. Tyler's situation is different. Different because Tyler was the chosen heir, the family investment, the child whose future mattered enough to fund properly." I watched Tyler rev the motorcycle engine, surrounded by friends who cheered his good fortune. He looked so young, so happy, so completely unaware of the financial manipulation happening around him. Part of me wanted to hate him for his obliviousness, for accepting family generosity without questioning its source or cost to others, but Tyler wasn't the architect of this inequality. He was just the beneficiary of decisions made by parents who'd allocated family resources based on gender expectations and traditional family role assignments. The real architects were inside the house, cutting birthday cake and accepting compliments on their generosity toward their son. That night, I lay awake in my childhood bedroom, listening to Tyler's friends leave and the house settle into quiet. My room looked exactly as I'd left it when I went to college, frozen in time like a museum exhibit of a daughter who'd moved on to bigger things. Tyler's room down the hall had been updated with new furniture and electronics. A 65-inch television dominated one wall, and his desk held a gaming setup that probably cost more than my entire semester's textbook. The difference in how our spaces were maintained told the same story as everything else. I was history, a daughter who'd grown up and moved away. Tyler was the present and future, a son whose comfort and happiness remained family priority. I pulled out my laptop and opened the folder I'd been building: documents, photos, screenshots, financial records, corporate filings, evidence of systematic inequality, proof of discriminatory asset distribution, documentation of family financial decisions that prioritized Tyler's future over mine. But evidence of what, exactly? What law had been broken? What rule had been violated? Parents were legally entitled to distribute their money however they chose. They could spend my college fund on Tyler's motorcycle and face no consequences beyond my disappointment and anger. The legal system wouldn't help me recover my stolen educational opportunities. The moral system that governed family relationships had no enforcement mechanism for financial fairness. I needed a different kind of justice, something that worked within the same framework my parents had used to redirect my college fund toward Tyler's benefit: creative financial management, Dad had called it. Maybe it was time for me to learn some creative financial management of my own. I opened a new browser tab and started researching retirement account rules, inheritance law, and family financial planning strategies. If my parents could redirect assets from my future toward Tyler's benefit, there might be ways to redirect assets from their future toward my education costs. The compass necklace lay on my nightstand, catching moonlight from the window. True north wasn't always the direction you wanted to go. Sometimes true north was the direction you needed to go, even if it meant crossing terrain you'd never navigated before. I had 3 months before graduate school started, 3 months to understand my family's complete financial picture, to identify resources that could legitimately be redirected toward my education, and to develop a strategy for creative financial management that would fund my future the way my parents had funded Tyler. Tomorrow, I would start learning to play by their rules. Tonight, I would plan my moves. Dr. Patricia Valdez, office occupied the corner suite of a modern building near the ASU campus, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the sprawling Phoenix Valley. I'd called her the Monday after Tyler's birthday party, asking if her consultation offer was still available. Of course, she'd said. Financial family dynamics are my specialty. Bring whatever documentation you have, and we'll see what options might be available to you. I arrived with a thick folder containing everything I'd discovered over the past month: corporate filings, property records, screenshots of Tyler's social media posts, bank statements from my depleted college fund, and pages of notes documenting the pattern of financial inequality I'd uncovered. Dr. Valdez reviewed the materials methodically, occasionally asking clarifying questions or making notes in the margins. Her expression remained professionally neutral, but I caught subtle shifts in her posture as she absorbed the scope of the disparity. "This is quite comprehensive," she said finally, closing the folder. "You've documented a clear pattern of discriminatory asset allocation within your family. The question is, what outcome are you hoping to achieve?" "I want to fund my graduate education without taking on debt that will compromise the next decade of my life. My parents have resources they're not disclosing, resources they're using to benefit Tyler while expecting me to finance my own future independently." Dr. Valdez leaned back in her chair. There are several approaches we could consider. The most straightforward would be family mediation, where we facilitate a conversation about equitable resource distribution. Many families are willing to address these disparities once they're clearly articulated. I thought about my mother's dismissive response when I'd raised concerns about the college fund, about the casual way my parents discussed Tyler's expensive gifts while suggesting I handle my own education costs. I don't think they'd be receptive to mediation. They seem to view the current arrangement as appropriate and fair. Then we need to consider more creative solutions. Your parents have made financial decisions that benefit them and Tyler while disadvantaging you. It's possible to make financial decisions that benefit you while disadvantaging them, using the same legal frameworks they've employed. She pulled out a legal pad and began sketching diagrams. Small business owners often have vulnerabilities they don't fully understand, particularly when they're engaged in succession planning that involves family members. Over the next hour, Dr. Valdez outlined strategies I'd never considered, ways to leverage family business structures, methods for accessing information about retirement accounts and investment portfolios, techniques for applying financial pressure that would motivate equitable resource distribution. The key, she explained, is to understand their complete financial picture before taking any action. You need to know exactly what resources are available and how they're structured legally. She handed me a business card for Benjamin Cross, an attorney who specialized in family financial disputes. Ben handles cases involving inheritance conflicts and asset distribution disagreements. He might be able to help you understand the legal landscape more thoroughly. I left Valdez's office with a clear plan and a new perspective on my situation. This wasn't just about recovering my college fund anymore. It was about achieving financial equity within a family system that had been structured to exclude me from long-term security and opportunity. Benjamin Cross's law office was located in downtown Phoenix, in one of the older buildings that had been renovated with modern amenities while preserving historical character. The receptionist led me to a conference room where Miss Ross was waiting with a cup of coffee and a legal pad covered in handwritten notes. He was older than Dr. Valdez, probably in his late 50s, with the kind of steady presence that suggested extensive experience with complex family situations. Valdez briefed me on your situation, he said as I sat down. Family financial discrimination cases are challenging because parents have broad discretion over asset distribution. But there are circumstances where that discretion can be legally questioned. I handed him copies of the corporate documents I'd discovered, along with evidence of the college fund depletion and Tyler's expensive gifts. Mr. Cross reviewed the materials with the careful attention of someone who understood the legal implications of each detail. The business restructuring is interesting, he said. When parents incorporate a family business and designate one child as heir while excluding another, they create potential liability issues. What kind of liability? If the excluded child has contributed labor or resources to the business over time, they may have legal claims to compensation or ownership stakes. Even informal contributions can create legal obligations under certain circumstances. I thought about the summers I'd worked at the hardware store during high school, the weekends I'd helped with inventory and customer service, the business plan suggestions I'd made for the garden center expansion. I worked there for 3 years during high school, unpaid labor, because it was considered family contribution. Mr. Cross made notes. Unpaid family labor creates interesting legal dynamics, especially when the business is later restructured to exclude the contributor from ownership benefits. Courts sometimes view this as unjust enrichment. He explained other potential vulnerabilities. If my parents had used business assets for personal expenses like Tyler's truck, they might be violating corporate law. If they'd misrepresented their financial situation when applying for business loans, they could face fraud allegations. If they'd failed to properly document the college fund transfer, it might be considered conversion of assets. The goal isn't necessarily to pursue litigation, Mr. Cross said. The goal is to understand your leverage so you can negotiate from a position of strength. He handed me a retainer agreement and a list of financial documents I should try to obtain. Gather as much information as possible about their complete asset picture, bank statements, investment accounts, retirement savings, business financial record. The more you understand about their situation, the more options you'll have for achieving an equitable resolution. That weekend, I drove to Tucson to visit Aunt Helen. She lived in a small house near the university, surrounded by desert landscaping and the kind of accumulated possessions that speak to a long, well-lived life. "I need to ask you about Mom and Dad's financial situation," I said over coffee in her sunlit kitchen. "Specifically about retirement savings and investment accounts." Aunt Helen raised an eyebrow. "That's a very specific question, Natalie. What's really going on?" I explained the situation more thoroughly than I had during our previous phone conversation. The college fund depletion, Tyler's expensive gifts, the business restructuring, the systematic exclusion from family asset planning. Aunt Helen listened with growing concern, occasionally shaking her head or muttering under her breath. "I knew they favored Tyler, but I didn't realize it had gone this far. Do you know anything about their retirement accounts, investment portfolios, assets they might not have mentioned?" "Your father's always been secretive about money," she said thoughtfully. "But I know they've been working with a financial advisor for years, someone at Merrill Lynch downtown. Your mother mentioned it when they were planning the business expansion." She disappeared into her bedroom and returned with a small address book. "Here it is, Margaret Chen at Merrill Lynch. Your mother gave me her card years ago when I was looking for investment advice. I copied the information into my phone." A Merrill Lynch financial advisor meant substantial assets, sophisticated investment strategies, and professional retirement plans. "There's something else," Aunt Helen said, settling back into her chair. "Your grandfather's life insurance policy. When he died 10 years ago, your parents were the beneficiaries. The payout was significant. Maybe $200,000. $200,000. Life insurance money that had never been mentioned in any family financial discussions. What did they do with it?" "I assumed they invested it for retirement. Your father mentioned wanting to be financially secure before turning the business over to Tyler. Financially secure enough to spend my college fund on Tyler's truck while preserving their retirement assets intact." I drove back to Phoenix that evening with new understanding of my family's financial landscape. They weren't struggling to make ends meet or juggling competing priorities with limited resources. They were wealthy people who'd chosen to allocate their wealth exclusively toward Tyler's benefit while expecting me to finance my own future independently. The next morning, I called Merrill Lynch and asked to speak with Margaret Chen. "I'm calling about my parents' account," I said when she answered. "Mark and Catherine Rivers. I'm helping them organize some financial planning documents." "Of course," Margaret said, "though I'll need to verify authorization before discussing account details. Is one of your parents available to confirm permission?" I'd anticipated this obstacle. "Actually, I was hoping you could help me understand what types of accounts they have with you. Just general category. I'm trying to organize their paperwork and I want to make sure I'm not missing any important documents." Margaret was professional but cautious. "I can tell you they have retirement accounts and investment portfolios with us, but specific details would require their direct authorization. Retirement accounts and investment portfolios, confirmation that substantial assets existed beyond the business and property. Could you give me a general sense of the account values? I'm trying to help them understand their overall financial picture." "I really can't discuss specific numbers without authorization," Margaret said, "but I can tell you they're well positioned for retirement. Your father's been very disciplined about contributions over the years, well positioned for retirement, while simultaneously claiming they couldn't afford to maintain my college fund." I thanked Margaret and hung up, then opened my laptop to research average retirement savings for small business owners in their mid-50s. The data suggested couples in my parents' situation typically accumulated between $500,000 and $1 million in retirement assets by age 55. My parents were hiding substantial wealth while portraying Tyler's truck and my college fund as competing priorities, requiring difficult choices. That afternoon, I met with Jordan Kim at a coffee shop near ASU. She'd been helping me understand the financial planning strategies my parents were likely using, and I needed her perspective on what I'd learned. $500,000 to $1 million in retirement savings, Jordan said, reviewing my notes, plus the business equity, plus the house equity, plus the life insurance money they invested. Your parents are probably worth over $1 million. And they spent my $23,000 college fund on Tyler's truck. Jordan shook her head. It's not about the money, Natalie. They have plenty of money. It's about control and family hierarchy. They're using financial resources to reinforce Tyler's position as the favored child, and your position as the expendable one. She pulled out her own laptop and opened a spreadsheet. Look at this from their perspective. They invest in Tyler's future through direct gifts, business ownership, and career development. Tyler remains financially dependent on them and grateful for their support. They expect you to finance your own future independently. You become financially independent and then less connected to the family. The strategy was working exactly as designed. Tyler was becoming more embedded in the family financial structure while I was being pushed toward independence and distance. What if I disrupted that strategy? I asked. Jordan looked up from her laptop. What if I found ways to access family resources for my education without their permission? Ways that forced them to choose between maintaining their retirement comfort and acknowledging my right to equitable treatment. That's a dangerous game, Natalie. You'd be playing with serious financial and legal consequences. They're already playing with serious consequences. My education, my career prospects, my financial future. Jordan was quiet for a moment, considering the implication. If you're serious about this, you need to understand their complete financial picture before taking any action. You need leverage that's substantial enough to motivate change, but precise enough to avoid serious legal trouble. That evening, I called Dr. Valdez and scheduled another appointment. I needed professional guidance for what I was considering, strategies that would be effective without crossing lines that couldn't be uncrossed. I want to create financial pressure that motivates equitable resource sharing, I told her when we met 2 days later. Something that demonstrates the cost of excluding me from family asset planning. Dr. Valdez reviewed the new information I'd gathered about retirement accounts and investment portfolios. Your parents have structured their finances to preserve long-term security while redirecting current assets toward Tyler's benefit. That structure creates vulnerabilities we can exploit. She outlined several approaches: business loan applications that required personal financial disclosures, which could be obtained through public records requests; tax return information that might be accessible through educational financial aid applications listing them as contribute; investment account details that could be gathered through inheritance planning discussions. The key is information gathering first, action second, she emphasized. You need to understand exactly what resources exist and how they're legally structured before determining the best pressure point. She handed me a detailed plan with timelines and specific steps. This process will take several weeks and require careful execution. Are you prepared for the potential consequences if your family discovers what you're doing? I thought about Tyler's motorcycle, about the business restructuring that excluded me, about my mother's casual dismissal of my education costs, while planning expensive gifts for Tyler's birthday. I'm prepared for the consequences of not doing it, I said. Over the next 3 weeks, I implemented Dr. Valdez's information gathering strategy with methodical precision. Public records requests revealed details about business loan applications and asset valuation. Conversations with family friends provided insights into my parents' lifestyle and spending patterns. Research into inheritance and estate planning gave me understanding of how their assets would be distributed upon their deaths. The picture that emerged was staggering in its scope. Conservative estimates put my parents' net worth at approximately $1 business equity, property values, retirement accounts, investment portfolios, and cash savings accumulated over 2 decades of successful business ownership. They were wealthy people who'd chosen to portray my college fund and Tyler's truck as competing priorities, requiring difficult financial sacrifices. But the most important discovery came from the business loan documents I obtained through public record. When applying for the $60,000 expansion loan, my parents had listed their total assets as collateral, including retirement accounts and investment portfolios. The loan agreement included acceleration clauses that could be triggered by significant changes in their financial situation. If their net worth dropped substantially, the bank could demand immediate repayment of the full loan amount. Dr. Valdez reviewed the loan documents with obvious interest. "This is exactly the kind of leverage we need," she said. "Your parents' business expansion is dependent on maintaining their current asset levels. Any significant reduction in their net worth could jeopardize the entire project." "How would their net worth be reduced?" "There are several ways. Unexpected tax liabilities, investment losses, large unplanned expenses. The key is creating financial pressure that motivates negotiation without causing permanent damage." She handed me contact information for a tax attorney who specialized in family financial disputes. "Talk to Richard Moore about gift tax implications and educational funding strategies. There might be ways to create legitimate tax obligations that require your parents to liquidate retirement assets." I left Valdez's office with a new understanding of the game my parents had been playing and the rules I could use to change the outcome. They'd structured their finances to benefit Tyler while excluding me, assuming I would accept the inequality without resistance. But every financial strategy created vulnerabilities, and every asset protection plan had pressure points that could be exploited by someone who understood the system well enough to use it effectively. That weekend I drove home to Phoenix for what I planned to be my final family visit. Before implementing my strategy, I needed to see the situation one more time through my new lens of understanding, to confirm that the inequality was as systematic and deliberate as my research suggested. Tyler was washing his motorcycle in the driveway when I arrived, using specialized cleaning products and microfiber cloths to maintain its showroom appearance. He waved enthusiastically when he saw me, gesturing for me to come admire his work. "Look at that shine," he said proudly, running his hand along the fuel tank. I spent 2 hours on the chrome alone. The motorcycle represented $12,000 of family money that could have funded a significant portion of my graduate education. Instead, it was being used for Tyler's weekend entertainment. "It's beautiful," I said, meaning it. The bike was objectively gorgeous, well maintained, and obviously cherished. "Mom and Dad are inside planning the garden center construction," Tyler continued. "They're so excited about the expansion. Dad says it'll double the business revenue within 3 years. The expansion that would create Tyler's future career and financial security, funded partially by my college savings and positioned to exclude me entirely from ownership benefits." I found my parents in the kitchen, reviewing architectural plans spread across the table. The greenhouse complex looked impressive, a sophisticated addition that would transform the hardware store into a comprehensive garden center and landscaping business. "This is going to be amazing," I said, studying the detailed drawings. Dad beamed with pride. "Tyler's going to manage the landscaping division. He's got a real vision for how to grow that side of the business." Tyler's vision, Tyler's future, Tyler's opportunity, built on a foundation of family assets that included my redirected college fund. "What about the financing?" I asked casually. "This must be expensive." "Oh, we've got it all worked out," Mom said. "Business loans, personal investments, creative financial plan. It's a big project, but we're confident it'll pay off in the long run." Creative financial planning, the same phrase Dad had used when describing how they'd funded Tyler's truck. I spent the evening observing family dynamics with new awareness. The casual way Tyler accepted expensive gifts and opportunities, the automatic assumption that family resources were available for his benefit. The equally casual way my parents dismissed my education costs as something I should handle independently, despite having substantial assets they'd never disclosed. The inequality wasn't accidental or temporary. It was a deliberate family structure that positioned Tyler as the investment priority, and me as the expendable child. That night, I sat in my childhood bedroom and opened my laptop to review the strategy Dr. Valdez and I had developed. Tomorrow, I would begin implementing financial pressure that would force my parents to choose between maintaining their comfortable retirement plans and acknowledging my right to equitable treatment. The compass necklace lay on my nightstand, its silver surface reflecting the glow from my computer screen. True north wasn't always the direction your family pointed you toward. Sometimes true north was the direction you had to find for yourself, using tools they'd never intended to teach you. Tomorrow, I would start navigating by my own compass. Tonight, I would prepare for the journey ahead. Richard Moore's tax law office was located in Scottsdale, in a sleek building that catered to high-net-worth clients seeking sophisticated financial strategies. The waiting room featured abstract art and leather furniture that spoke to the kind of money his typical clients possessed. When the receptionist led me to his office, Mr. Moore was reviewing documents at a mahogany desk that probably cost more than my semester's tuition. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with the sharp focus of someone who understood complex financial regulations. "Dr. Valdez explained your situation," he said, gesturing for me to sit across from his desk. "Family asset inequality cases involving educational funding. There are several tax strategies we could employ to create legitimate financial pressure." I handed him the folder containing my parents' financial information, business loan documents, and evidence of the systematic resource allocation that favored Tyler while excluding me. Mr. Moore reviewed the materials with the careful attention of someone who specialized in finding legal vulnerabilities in financial structures. "Your parents have substantial unreported gift tax liability," he said after 20 minutes of analysis. "What do you mean?" "The motorcycle, the truck, the business restructuring that gives Tyler ownership shares. These are all gifts that exceed annual exclusion limits. Your parents should have filed gift tax returns and paid taxes on the excess amounts." He pulled out a calculator and began working through numbers. The truck was $32,000, the motorcycle was $12,000, and the business shares transferred to Tyler are worth approximately $200,000, based on the corporate valuation documents. That's nearly $250,000 in unreported gifts. The tax liability on unreported gifts that large would be substantial, requiring immediate payment that could force my parents to liquidate retirement assets. How would the IRS find out about unreported gifts? Mr. Moore's expression remained carefully neutral. Gift tax violations are often discovered through routine audits, third-party reporting, or whistleblower complaints. The IRS has systems for detecting large asset transfers that should have triggered gift tax reporting. He handed me a business card for a CPA who specialized in tax compliance issues. "Talk to Sandra Martinez about whistleblower procedures and gift tax reporting requirements. She can help you understand the process for reporting suspected tax violations." I left Ms. Moore's office with a new understanding of the vulnerability I'd been looking for. My parents had violated federal tax law by giving Tyler expensive gifts without proper reporting. The penalties and interest on unreported gift taxes would create exactly the kind of financial pressure Valdez had described. Sandra Martinez's accounting office was located in a converted house near downtown Phoenix, with the kind of practical, no-nonsense atmosphere that suggested focus on results rather than appearances. She reviewed my documentation while I explained the situation. "This is a clear case of gift tax evasion," she said, making notes on a legal pad. "The penalties alone could exceed $50,000, not including interest and the underlying tax liability." "How does the whistleblower process work?" Sandra explained the IRS procedures for reporting suspected tax violations. Form 21, supporting documentation, investigation timelines, and potential rewards for reporting significant tax fraud. The process was designed to encourage people to report tax violations they'd discovered, particularly when substantial amounts were involved. "The key is documentation," she emphasized. "You need clear evidence of the gifts, their values, and the fact that gift tax returns weren't filed. Based on what you've shown me, you have everything necessary for a successful whistleblower complaint." She helped me prepare the Form 21, organizing the evidence in the format the IRS expects. Photos of Tyler's truck and motorcycle, corporate documents showing the business share transfers, financial records proving the gift values, and documentation confirming that no gift tax returns had been filed. Once you submit this, the IRS will begin an investigation, Sandra warned. Your parents will receive audit notices and demands for immediate payment of taxes, penalties, and interest. Are you prepared for their reaction when they realize what's happened? I thought about the depleted college fund, about Tyler's expensive gifts, purchased with my educational money, about the business restructuring that excluded me from any ownership benefits. I'm prepared for their reaction to the consequences of their choices, I said. The next step was creating additional pressure points that would motivate negotiation rather than simple compliance with tax obligations. Dr. Valdez had suggested targeting the business loan that funded their expansion project, the loan that could be accelerated if their net worth dropped significantly. I met with Benjamin Cross again to discuss strategies for triggering the loan acceleration clause. The gift tax liability will reduce their net worth substantially, he explained, reviewing the loan documents. But to trigger acceleration, you need to demonstrate that the reduction puts the loan at risk. He outlined a multi-pronged approach. The IRS investigation would create immediate tax liabilities that reduced their net worth. Simultaneously, I could request formal business valuations that might reveal the company was worth less than they'd claimed on loan application. Combined with documentation of their personal spending on Tyler's gifts, these factors could justify demanding loan acceleration. The goal isn't to destroy their business, Mr. Cross emphasized. The goal is to create enough financial pressure that negotiating with you becomes more attractive than fighting the tax liability and loan acceleration. I spent the following week implementing the strategy with methodical precision. The IRS whistleblower complaint was filed with comprehensive documentation of the unreported gifts. Requests for business valuations were submitted to 3 independent appraisal companies. Letters to the bank were prepared explaining concerns about loan collateral misrepresentation. But before triggering these pressure points, I decided to give my parents one opportunity to address the inequality voluntarily. I called Mom and asked if we could have lunch, just the two of us, to discuss my graduate school planning. We met at Sunrise Diner near their house, a family restaurant where we'd shared meals throughout my childhood. The familiar environment felt strange now, like visiting a place that held memories of a different person. I need to talk to you about funding for graduate school, I said after we'd ordered. Mom's expression immediately became guarded. Natalie, we've discussed this multiple times. Graduate school is expensive, but there are loans available. Lots of students finance their advanced education independently. But Tyler didn't finance his education independently, and he's receiving family gifts that could fund my entire graduate program. Tyler's situation is different, Mom said, using the same phrase she'd used before. He's staying local, working in the family business. You're pursuing your own path, my own path that I'm expected to fund myself, while Tyler's path receives full family financial support. Mom shifted uncomfortably. You're smart and capable, Natalie. You'll figure out a way to make it work. Tyler needs more guidance and support. The conversation continued in circles, with Mom defending the resource allocation while refusing to acknowledge the fundamental inequality. Tyler deserved family investment because he was staying local and working in the business. I was expected to finance my own future because I was smart enough to figure it out independently. What about family assets I don't know about? I asked finally. Retirement accounts, investment portfolios, savings that could help fund my education without impacting your daily expenses. Mom's expression became even more guarded. Our retirement planning is private, Natalie. It's not appropriate for you to be asking about our personal financial affairs. Private when it came to funding my education, but apparently available for funding Tyler's truck, motorcycle, and business ownership shares. I left the lunch, feeling confirmed in my decision to proceed with the financial pressure strategy. My parents had no intention of addressing the inequality voluntarily. They viewed the current arrangement as appropriate and fair, with Tyler receiving family investment and me receiving encouragement to be financially independent. That afternoon, I submitted the IRS whistleblower complaint from a computer at the ASU library. Form 21 with 43 pages of supporting documentation, evidence of nearly $250,000 in unreported gifts, proof of systematic tax law violations that had persisted for over 2 years. The business valuation requests were submitted the same day, with instructions to provide comprehensive analyses of Rivers Hardware and Garden Center's actual market value compared to the inflated valuations used in loan applications. By evening, the first phase of my strategy was in motion. Within weeks, my parents would receive audit notices and demands for immediate payment of substantial tax liabilities. The financial pressure would force them to choose between liquidating retirement assets and negotiating an equitable resolution to my education funding. I spent the weekend preparing for their inevitable reaction. Phone calls demanding explanations, family meetings designed to guilt me into withdrawing the complaints, attempts to portray me as vindictive and ungrateful for taking action against my own parent. But I also prepared evidence packets that would justify my actions: documentation of the college fund depletion, proof of Tyler's expensive gifts, evidence of the business restructuring that excluded me, records of family asset levels that contradicted their claims about limited resource. The first indication that my strategy was working came on Wednesday morning. Tyler called me, his voice strained and confused. "Natalie, something weird is happening with Mom and Dad. They got some kind of letter from the IRS yesterday, and now they're freaking out about taxes and audits and owing money. Do you know anything about this? What kind of letter?" "I don't know exactly. Mom won't show it to me, but I heard her on the phone with someone about gift taxes and penalties. She was crying, which I've never seen before." Tyler genuinely had no idea that his expensive gifts had tax implications, that accepting family generosity without proper reporting created legal liabilities for our parents. He'd been raised to receive family financial support without questioning its source or cost. "Maybe you should ask them about it directly," I suggested. I tried, but they just said it was a misunderstanding that would get worked out. "But Natalie," they looked really scared, like genuinely terrified about something. The fear was justified. Based on my calculations, the tax liability for unreported gifts would exceed $70,000, not including penalties and interest that could double the total amount. Thursday brought a voicemail from Dad, his voice carefully controlled but underlying tension evident. "Natalie, we need to talk. There are some family financial matters we need to discuss with you. Can you come home this weekend? It's important." I called back and agreed to visit Saturday afternoon. I spent Friday preparing for what would likely be an intense confrontation, reviewing my documentation and practicing responses to the accusations and guilt tactics I expected. Saturday's drive to Phoenix felt different from previous trips home. Instead of anxiety about family dynamics I couldn't control, I felt the calm focus that came from understanding exactly what leverage I possessed and how to use it effectively. My parents were waiting in the living room when I arrived, their faces carrying the kind of stress that spoke to serious financial pressure. Tyler sat on the couch looking confused and concerned, clearly aware that something significant was happening but uncertain about the detail. "We received some concerning correspondence from the IRS," Dad began without preamble. "They're claiming we owe substantial gift taxes on money we've spent helping Tyler with his education and transportation needs." "How substantial?" I asked. Mom handed me a copy of the audit notice. The preliminary assessment was for $83,000 in taxes, penalties, and interest on unreported gifts, dating back 3 years. "This is devastating," Mom said, her voice shaking slightly. "We don't have $80,000 in liquid assets. We'd have to borrow against the business or liquidate retirement accounts." The same retirement accounts they'd refused to discuss when I'd asked about funding my graduate education. "The IRS letter mentions a whistleblower complaint," Dad continued, his eyes searching my face for reaction. "Someone reported our family financial transactions to federal authorities." Tyler looked genuinely shocked. "Someone we know reported us to the IRS. Who would do something like that?" I met Dad's gaze direct. "Someone who understood that large gifts require proper tax reporting, and that failing to file required forms creates legal liability." The room went silent. Mom's face went pale, and Dad's expression shifted from confusion to understanding to anger. "You," he said quietly, "you reported your own family to the IRS. I reported unreported gift tax violations that I discovered during research into family asset distribution patterns." Tyler looked back and forth between us, clearly struggling to understand what was happening. "Wait, what? Natalie, you're the one who got Mom and Dad in trouble with the IRS. I'm the one who reported tax law violations involving gifts that were purchased with money from my college fund, while I was told the family couldn't afford to help with my education costs." Mom stood up abruptly. "How could you do this to us? We're your parents. We raised you, supported you, loved you, and this is how you repay us." "You supported Tyler," I correct. "You gave him my college fund money for a truck, bought him a $12,000 motorcycle for his birthday, and restructured the family business to make him the sole heir. You told me to take out loans for graduate school while spending more money on Tyler's entertainment vehicle than my entire education fund." Dad's anger was building, his face reddening, as he processed the implications of what I'd done. "So you decided to destroy our financial security, to risk our business and our retirement, because you're jealous of your brother?" "I decided to create consequences for systematic financial discrimination that favored Tyler while excluding me from family asset planning." Tyler finally spoke, his voice small and uncertain. "The truck and the motorcycle, they really cost that much, and it came from Natalie's college money." Mom and Dad exchanged glances, clearly realizing that Tyler had been unaware of the funding sources for his gifts. "Tyler, family finances are complicated," Mom began. "We made decisions we thought were best for everyone. But Natalie's college fund," Tyler continued, looking directly at me, "that was supposed to be for your graduate school, wasn't it?" I nodded. $23,000 that Grandma and Grandpa started, that Mom and Dad contributed to for 18 years. "It's gone." Tyler's expression changed as he began to understand the real cost of his expensive gifts. "I didn't know. I never asked where the money came from. I just thought you guys could afford it." "We can afford it," Dad said firmly. "We have assets and income. We made choices about how to allocate resources based on different family priorities." "Different priorities," I repeated. "Tyler gets direct gifts and business ownership. I get encouragement to be financially independent." The conversation devolved into accusations and defensive justifications, with my parents insisting they'd acted appropriately while I documented the systematic inequality that had motivated my action. But the key moment came when Mom, in frustration, revealed information she hadn't intended to share. "We have over $800,000 in retirement savings," she said angrily. "We could pay for your graduate school 10 times over. But graduate education is an investment in your future that you should finance yourself. Tyler's situation is different because he's staying with the family business. $800,000 in retirement savings, more than enough to fund my education without impacting their long-term security, but preserved exclusively for their benefit, while my college fund was redirected to Tyler's entertainment purchases." Tyler stared at Mom in shock. $800,000, and you took Natalie's college money for my truck." The family meeting ended without resolution, but with new understanding on all sides. Tyler now knew the real source and cost of his gifts. My parents understood that their financial decisions had legal consequences they hadn't anticipated, and I had confirmation that substantial assets existed that could fund my education without compromising their retirement security. Over the following week, the business valuation reports arrived, revealing that Rivers Hardware and Garden Center was worth approximately 30% less than my parents had claimed on loan application. The discrepancy raised questions about loan fraud that could trigger immediate acceleration of their $60,000 expansion loan. I forwarded copies of the valuation reports to the bank, along with documentation suggesting that my parents had misrepresented their collateral when applying for business finance. By Thursday, my parents had received notice from Desert Valley Credit Union, demanding immediate loan renegotiation based on collateral revaluation concerns. The financial pressure was working exactly as Dr. Valdez had predicted. My parents now faced $83,000 in IRS liabilities, potential acceleration of a $60,000 business loan, and questions about their asset valuations that could impact future financing options. Friday afternoon brought a phone call from Mom, her voice carefully controlled but obviously stressed. "Natalie, we need to discuss a resolution to this situation. The financial pressures you've created are threatening our business and our retirement security. I'm willing to discuss equitable solutions," I said. "What would it take for you to help us resolve the IRS situation and the loan issues?" The question I'd been waiting for. The moment when negotiation became possible because the cost of ignoring my education funding had become higher than the cost of addressing it equitably. "Full funding for my graduate program," I said. $40,000 transferred directly to ASU for tuition and expense. "In exchange, I'll provide documentation to the IRS and the bank, explaining that the issues were the result of misunderstandings that have been resolved through family financial planning adjustment." There was a long pause. $40,000 is a substantial amount, less than half of what Tyler has received in gifts over the past 2 years. And less than 5% of your retirement savings that you mentioned during our conversation last week. Another pause. "We'll need to discuss this as a family." The negotiation had begun. My parents were finally ready to treat my education funding as a legitimate family financial priority rather than an individual responsibility I should handle independently. That weekend, I waited for their decision while reviewing the legal protections Mr. Cross had built into my strategy. The IRS complaint was legitimate and couldn't be withdrawn without proper resolution. The business loan issues were based on factual valuation discrepancies that required genuine financial adjustments. My parents had 2 choices: negotiate an equitable resolution that funded my education, or face the full financial consequences of their systematic asset allocation decision. Either way, the days of Tyler receiving family investment while I was expected to finance my own future independently were over. Monday morning arrived with an email from Mom that carried the formal tone of a business correspondence rather than family communication. "Natalie, after extensive discussion and consultation with our financial advisor, we are prepared to consider a resolution to the current situation. Please call us this evening to discuss terms." I spent the day at ASU finalizing my graduate program enrollment, ensuring that all paperwork was ready for immediate submission once funding was secure. The environmental engineering department had held my acceptance through the summer, but fall semester started in 6 weeks, and financial arrangements needed to be completed soon. Dr. Valdez reviewed my negotiation strategy during an afternoon meeting at her office. "Remember that they're motivated by financial pressure, not fairness or family harmony," she reminded me. "Keep the focus on practical resolution rather than emotional reconciliation." When I called my parents that evening, Dad answered with a businesslike tone that matched Mom's email. "We've consulted with Margaret Chen at Merrill Lynch about liquidating some retirement assets to address the current financial obligations," he began without preamble. "She's advised us that early withdrawal penalties and tax implications make this an expensive solution, but a necessary one, given the IRS assessment and loan acceleration demands," I replied. "Yes," Dad admitted grudgingly. "We're facing immediate financial pressure that requires access to retirement funds we'd planned to preserve until we actually retire." Mom took over the conversation. "We're willing to transfer $40,000 to Arizona State University for your graduate program expenses. In exchange, we need your cooperation in resolving the tax compliance issues and providing documentation to the bank about asset valuation." The offer was exactly what I'd requested, but I waited before responding, letting the silence emphasize my position of strength in the negotiation. "The $40,000 covers tuition and fees," I said finally. "But graduate school also involves living expenses, books, research costs. The total program expense is closer to $60,000 over 2 years." Dad's voice sharpened. $60,000 is substantially more than we discussed. It's also substantially less than the combined value of Tyler's truck and motorcycle, and roughly half of what you've invested in business expansion that benefits Tyler exclusively. There was muffled conversation on their end of the call, the sound of hands covering the phone while they conferred privately. "We'll agree to $50,000, Mom said when they returned to the line, $40,000 for direct university expenses, and $10,000 for living costs. That's our final offer. I considered the amount. $50,000 would cover the essential costs of graduate school, though I'd still need to work part-time for discretionary expenses. More importantly, it represented acknowledgement that my education deserved family financial support rather than individual debt financing. I'll accept $50,000, I said, with 2 additional conditions. What condition? First, the money transfers to ASU immediately, before any cooperation with tax or loan resolution. I'm not providing assistance with your financial problems until my education funding is secured. Dad sighed heavily. And the second condition, Tyler needs to understand the complete financial picture. He deserves to know what his gifts actually cost the family and how the business succession planning affects both of us. This demand created another pause for private consultation. Tyler's education about family finances is not part of this negotiation, Mom said firmly. Then we don't have an agreement, I replied calmly. Tyler is an adult who's receiving substantial family assets. He has the right to understand the source and implications of those gifts. The conversation ended without resolution, but I wasn't concerned. The financial pressure my parents faced wouldn't diminish over time. The IRS assessment required immediate attention, and the business loan acceleration demanded prompt action. They needed my cooperation more than I needed their approval of my conditions. Tuesday brought a call from Tyler, his voice carrying stress I'd never heard before. Natalie, I need to ask you something direct. Did you really report Mom and Dad to the IRS because they bought me a truck and a motorcycle? I reported unreported gift tax violations involving substantial asset transfers that occurred while I was told the family couldn't afford to help with my education costs. Tyler was quiet for a moment, but the truck and the bike, they were gifts. I didn't ask for them. I didn't know they were supposed to be reported to the government. The reporting requirement isn't your responsibility, Tyler. It's theirs. But the gifts were funded with money from my college account while I was being told to take out loans for graduate school. Your college money, he said slowly. I didn't know about that part. What did you think when they bought you a $32,000 truck? Where did you think that money came from? I don't know. I guess I thought they could afford it. They never said anything about there being problems with money or having to choose between things. Tyler's naivety was understandable. He'd been raised to receive family financial support without questioning its source or cost. The concept of finite resources requiring difficult allocation decisions had never been part of his experience. They can afford it, I explained. They have over $800,000 in retirement savings, but they chose to preserve their assets while spending mine on your gifts. The silence stretched longer this time. $800,000, they have that much money saved, plus the business equity, plus the house equity, plus other investments. They're wealthy people who've chosen to portray your truck and my education as competing priorities requiring difficult choices. Tyler's voice was smaller when he spoke again. I feel like I've been lied to. Like everyone's been making decisions about money and my future without telling me what was really happening. You have been lied to. We both have. The difference is that the lies benefited you while disadvantaging me. That evening, Tyler appeared at my apartment in Tempe without calling first. He looked exhausted, like someone who'd spent the day questioning fundamental assumptions about his life. I want to give back the motorcycle, he said as soon as I opened the door. I invited him inside and made coffee while he explained his thinking. If Mom and Dad used your college money to buy my stuff, then I should give it back so you can have your education money. It's not fair for me to keep something that came from your future. His offer was genuine and touching, but impractical. The motorcycle is worth $12,000 now, Tyler. My college fund was $23,000. And graduate school costs $50,000. Returning the bike doesn't solve the fundamental problem. Then what would solve it? I handed him coffee and sat across from him at my small kitchen table. Mom and Dad need to acknowledge that family resources should be distributed equitably. They have enough money to fund both your future and mine, without anyone sacrificing opportunities. Tyler stared into his coffee cup. I never thought about money this way before. I just accepted what they gave me and assumed it was normal family stuff. It is normal for families to support their children's education and career development. What's not normal is supporting one child exclusively while expecting the other to finance their own future independently. He looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Something like guilt mixed with determination. What can I do to help fix this? Talk to them honestly about what you've learned. Ask direct questions about family asset distribution and inheritance planning. Make it clear that you want transparency about financial decisions that affect both of. Tyler left that evening with a new understanding of family dynamics he'd never questioned before. For the first time in his life, he was thinking about money as a finite resource that required equitable distribution, rather than something that appeared automatically to fund his desires. Wednesday brought the call I'd been expecting from Mom, her voice tight with frustration. Tyler has been asking uncomfortable questions about family finances and inheritance planning. He's demanding explanations about asset distribution that are frankly none of his business at his age. Tyler is 21 years old and has received substantial family assets, I replied. Financial transparency is appropriate for adult children who are beneficiaries of family wealth. He's threatening to refuse future family gifts until we resolve the situation with your education funding. This was an interesting development I hadn't anticipated. Tyler was using his position as the favored child to advocate for equitable treatment, creating pressure from within the family structure rather than external financial threat. That sounds like Tyler is developing a mature understanding of family financial responsibility, I said. It sounds like Tyler is being manipulated by his sister into making demands that jeopardize family harmony. Mom's family harmony that was based on me accepting inequality without complaint, while Tyler received preferential treatment without awareness. Maybe genuine harmony requires genuine equity. Thursday's negotiation call included Tyler on three-way, creating family dynamics I'd never experienced before. For the first time, Tyler was participating in financial planning discussions, rather than simply receiving the results of decisions made without his input. I want to understand exactly how much money the family has and how it's being distributed between Natalie and me, Tyler said without preamble. I don't want any more gifts or inheritance if Natalie isn't getting equal treatment. Dad's voice carried frustration. Tyler, family financial planning is complex. Your sister is pursuing a career path that requires independence, while you're staying with the family business. Different situations require different approaches, but different approaches shouldn't mean different levels of family support, Tyler replied, clearly having thought through his position. If Natalie needs $50,000 for graduate school and you have $800,000 in retirement savings, why is that even a difficult decision? Mom tried to regain control of the conversation. Tyler, you don't understand the long-term implications of these financial decisions. Then explain them to me, Tyler said firmly. Explain why Natalie should take out loans while I get free trucks and motorcycle. Explain why the business is being restructured to give me ownership while excluding her entirely. The conversation continued for over an hour, with Tyler asking pointed questions about asset distribution that my parents struggled to answer without acknowledging the systematic inequality they'd created. By the end of the call, they'd agreed to my term. $50,000 transferred to ASU within 1 week, with Tyler included in all future family financial planning discussions and full transparency about inheritance and asset distribution plan. Friday afternoon brought confirmation that the first payment had been transferred to my ASU account, $25,000 for fall semester tuition fees and expenses, with the remaining $25,000 scheduled for spring semester. I called Benjamin Cross to inform him that family resolution had been reached, and that I was prepared to provide cooperation with tax compliance and loan renegotiation as agreed. Congratulations, you achieved an outcome that protects your interests while maintaining family relationships. That's not always possible in these situations. Dr. Valdez was equally pleased when I met with her for a final consultation. You've established a new family financial dynamic that recognizes your right to equitable treatment, she observed. More importantly, you've educated Tyler about resource allocation and transparency. That will serve both of you well in the future. The IRS resolution process took 3 weeks, with my parents working through tax compliance procedures and payment plans for gift tax liabilities. I provided documentation explaining that the family had implemented improved financial planning practices that addressed previous oversight. The business loan renegotiation was more complex, requiring updated asset valuations and revised collateral agreements. But with my cooperation in explaining the circumstances, Desert Valley Credit Union agreed to modified terms that preserved my parents' expansion plans while reflecting accurate asset values. By late August, all financial and legal issues had been resolved. My graduate program started on schedule with full funding secured. Tyler had new understanding of family financial dynamics, and my parents had learned that systematic asset inequality created legal and practical vulnerabilities they couldn't ignore. The first semester of graduate school was everything I'd hoped for. Environmental engineering coursework that challenged my analytical abilities, research opportunities that aligned with my career goals, and financial security that allowed me to focus on academics rather than constant worry about debt accumulation. Tyler visited campus in October, driving his truck but with a different attitude toward the vehicle. I still appreciate it, he told me over lunch at the student union, but now I understand what it actually cost the family. It's not just a truck anymore. It's a $23,000 decision that affected your future. He'd also begun asking serious questions about business succession planning and his role in the family company. I want to earn my position rather than just inherit it, he explained. If I'm going to take over Rivers Hardware someday, I should prove I'm qualified through performance, not just family connections. My relationship with my parents remained strained but functional. They'd fulfilled their financial obligations and maintained civil communication, but the underlying resentment about my tactics was obvious. I'd forced them to acknowledge inequality they'd preferred to ignore, using methods that created genuine financial pressure and legal complications. You got what you wanted, Mom said during a brief phone call in November. I hope you're satisfied with the damage to family trust. I got equitable treatment, I corrected. Family trust that was based on me accepting discrimination wasn't worth preserving. The conversation ended quickly, as most of our interactions did now. We'd found a functional equilibrium that allowed for basic family communication without pretending that fundamental relationships hadn't changed. Christmas break brought me home to Phoenix for a family gathering that felt different from previous years. Tyler and I were now allies in understanding family financial dynamics, while my parents maintained careful politeness that acknowledged new power balance. The compass necklace caught Christmas lights as we opened gifts, reminding me of my grandmother's advice about finding true north. Sometimes family pointed you in the wrong direction, and sometimes true north required navigation skills they'd never intended to teach you. But I'd learned to use my own compass, and the direction it pointed was toward a future I was funding myself, with resources that rightfully belonged to my education and career development. Tyler's Christmas gift to me was unexpected. A framed photo of our family taken before the conflicts began, back when I'd believed family support was distributed fairly, and family resources were allocated based on need, rather than favoritism. I wanted you to have this, he said as I unwrapped it, to remember that some family relationships are worth protecting, even when others needed to be fixed. The photo showed us at the lake house that had been transferred exclusively to Tyler's ownership, standing together before I'd understood how family assets were really being distributed. We looked happy and unified, unaware of the systematic inequality that would eventually force difficult choices about loyalty and justice. I placed the photo on my apartment shelf when I returned to school, not as nostalgia for a simpler time, but as reminder of how much I'd learned about protecting my own interests when family systems failed to protect them automatically. Graduate school continued successfully through spring semester and into my second year. The research assistantship I'd earned provided additional income and valuable experience, while the family funding allowed me to focus on academic excellence rather than financial survival. Tyler completed his automotive technology program and began working full-time at Rivers Hardware, but with new awareness of business ownership responsibilities and asset distribution implications. He'd insisted on formal employment contracts and performance evaluations rather than casual family arrangements. By the spring of my final semester, I'd secured a position with an environmental consulting firm in Denver, a career opportunity that represented everything I'd worked toward since undergraduate school. The job offer included relocation assistance and a starting salary that would allow me to live comfortably while beginning to build my own wealth. My parents attended my graduate school graduation ceremony in May, sitting with Tyler in the audience as I received my master's degree in environmental engineering. The achievement felt complete in ways it wouldn't have if I'd been burdened with substantial debt or compromised by financial stress during the program. After the ceremony, Dad approached me with an expression I'd rarely seen before, something like respect mixed with acknowledgement. "You accomplished what you set out to do," he said simply. "Graduate school, career opportunity, financial independence. I may not agree with your methods, but I can't argue with your results." "The methods were necessary because the inequality was systematic," I replied. "If family resources had been distributed equitably from the beginning, none of the financial pressure tactics would have been needed." Dad nodded slowly. "Maybe you're right. Maybe we didn't see the situation clearly until you forced us to examine it." Tyler hugged me enthusiastically after the graduation photos were taken. "I'm proud of you for fighting for what you deserved," he said, "and I'm grateful you taught me to think about family money differently. It's made me a better person, and a better business partner." The compass necklace reflected afternoon sunlight as my family gathered for a celebratory dinner, marking the end of my graduate program and the beginning of my career. True North had led me through terrain I'd never expected to navigate, using skills I'd never planned to develop. But I'd found my direction, secured my future, and established my right to equitable treatment within family financial systems that had been structured to exclude me. The conversation at dinner focused on my job in Denver, Tyler's increasing responsibilities at the hardware store, and plans for the garden center expansion that would define the business's future growth. We were a family that had been forced to confront systematic inequality and legal vulnerabilities, but had emerged with clearer understanding of fair resource distribution and transparent financial planning. The inequality hadn't been an accident or oversight. It had been a deliberate family structure that favored Tyler while expecting me to finance my own future independently. But when that structure created legal liability and financial pressure, negotiation became possible and equity became achievable. Sometimes justice required disrupting systems that benefited others while disadvantaging you. Sometimes protecting your future meant creating consequences for people who'd chosen to redirect your resources towards someone else's benefit. But most importantly, sometimes finding your true north meant learning to navigate by principles they'd never intended to teach you, using tools they'd never planned to provide, toward destinations they'd never expected you to reach. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.